Commander Velthara pressed her clawed hand against the cold metal surface of the observation deck. Through the reinforced glass, stars stretched endlessly in all directions. Her ship, the Dominion's Pride, cut through space like a blade through silk. Behind her, the soft hum of activity filled the bridge as her crew prepared for what they all believed would be another routine conquest. "Ma'am, the intelligence reports are ready for your review," said her communications officer, a young Krillian, whose scales still held the bright blue of inexperience. Velthara turned away from the stars and walked to the central command table. Their holographic display flickered to life, showing detailed scans and data about their target. The information floated in the air like glowing text, painting a picture of what seemed to be just another primitive species. Species designation. Human, she read aloud, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had done this 47 times before. Average lifespan, approximately 80 standard years. Technology level, recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Military capability. Minimal. Her tactical officer, a grizzled veteran named Korthax, let out what could only be described as a chuckle. Minimal military capability. Haven't we heard that before? Indeed we have, Velthara replied, but something felt different this time. She couldn't quite place what it was. The data seemed too clean, too simple. In her experience, most species had at least some surprises hidden in their military records. These humans appeared almost transparent in their simplicity. The bridge fell quiet as she continued reading. Primary colonies, 12 systems, population, roughly 30 billion across all worlds. Political structure, divided into multiple governments. She paused, frowning at the next line. Notable characteristic, extensive historical records of internal conflicts. "They fight each other?" asked her navigation officer, confusion clear in her voice. "Apparently so. The records show thousands of years of warfare between their own kind." Velthara found this puzzling. Most species the Krillian Empire encountered had evolved beyond internal conflicts by the time they reached the stars. It was almost a universal constant that space travel required cooperation and unity. Korthax leaned forward, studying the data more carefully. "Commander, look at this timeline. These conflicts, they never really stopped. Even as they developed space travel, they continued fighting among themselves." The bridge crew exchanged glances. This was unusual, certainly, but not necessarily concerning. If anything, a divided species would be easier to conquer than a united one. "What about their defensive capabilities?" Velthara asked, scrolling through more data. "Basic plasma weapons, conventional missiles, and standard energy shields," came the reply from her weapons specialist. "Nothing we haven't seen before. Their largest warships are roughly 1/10 the size of our smallest frigates." Velthara nodded, feeling her initial unease fade away. The numbers made sense. A species that spent most of its time fighting itself wouldn't have the resources or unity to develop truly advanced military technology. They would be scattered, disorganized, and vulnerable. "Estimated time for full conquest?" she asked. 3 standard days, ma'am. Maybe 4 if they put up more resistance than expected." "Excellent. Set course for their primary colony cluster. We'll start with their world called New Sol. According to the intelligence, it's one of their newer settlements, should be lightly defended." As her ship changed course, Velthara walked back to the observation deck. She had conquered species that built cities underwater, others that lived in the hearts of gas giants, and even a few that existed partially in other dimensions. Each conquest had added to the Empire's strength and her own reputation. This would be number 48. But as she stared out at the stars, that nagging feeling returned. Something about the human data bothered her, though she couldn't identify what. The intelligence was too perfect, too complete. Usually, gathering information about a new species required months of careful observation and infiltration. Yet the data on humans had come together remarkably quickly. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, interrupting her thoughts. "We're receiving some unusual transmissions from the target system." "Unusual how?" "They appear to be entertainment broadcasts, music, visual programs, something they call movies. The transmissions are incredibly strong, almost like they want..." the entire galaxy to hear them. Velthara found this odd. Most species, upon detecting an approaching alien fleet, would either send surrender messages or emergency military communications. Entertainment broadcasts suggested either complete ignorance of the approaching threat or an unusual level of confidence. Are they aware of our approach? Impossible to tell, ma'am, but the broadcasts continue unchanged. She dismissed the observation with a wave of her hand. Primitive species often behaved irrationally when faced with superior technology. Some froze in fear. Others went about their normal routines as if denial could make the threat disappear. Continue on course. We'll be at New Sol within 6 hours. As the Dominion's pride accelerated toward human space, Velthara couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. But with 47 successful conquests behind her, confidence overrode caution. After all, what could possibly go wrong with a species that fought itself more than it fought others? The shuttle bay of the Dominion's pride hummed with activity, as Commander Velthara prepared for what she expected to be a simple landing operation. Her armor gleamed under the artificial lights, each piece representing decades of successful conquests. Behind her, 12 of her best soldiers checked their weapons one final time. Remember, she addressed her team, these humans are primitive, but unpredictable. Stay alert, but don't expect serious resistance. The shuttle descended through New Sol's atmosphere, and Velthara pressed her face to the viewing port. What she saw below made her pause. The colony looked nothing like the rough frontier settlement she had expected. Gleaming towers rose from carefully planned districts, connected by transport tubes that pulsed with constant traffic. Gardens and parks dotted the landscape between residential areas that seemed to house millions rather than thousands. "This doesn't match our intelligence reports," muttered Sergeant Corthavel, her second-in-command. "Intelligence can be wrong about population numbers," Velthara replied, though doubt crept into her voice. "The important thing is their military capability remains minimal." The shuttle touched down in what appeared to be the colony's central plaza. As the boarding ramp lowered, Velthara expected to see crowds of terrified civilians running for cover. Instead, she found herself looking at a welcoming committee. A middle-aged human man stepped forward, wearing simple civilian clothes that somehow managed to look both casual and official. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, and his expression remained calm despite the alien warship hovering overhead. "Welcome to New Sol," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the plaza. "I'm Governor Jin Wu. We've been expecting you." Velthara's mandibles clicked in surprise. In 47 previous conquests, no one had ever said they were expecting her. "You knew we were coming?" "Of course. Your ships aren't exactly subtle." Jin Wu gestured toward the sky where the Dominion's pride blocked out a significant portion. "Give the afternoon sun. We prepared refreshments if you'd like to discuss terms." "Terms?" Velthara found herself genuinely confused. This conversation was not following any script she knew. A human woman approached, carrying what appeared to be a data tablet. She was younger than Jin Wu, with an efficient manner that reminded Velthara of her own staff officers. "I'm Administrator." "How young? We've prepared several proposals for your consideration." "Proposals?" Velthara's confusion deepened. "You understand why we're here, don't you?" "Certainly. You represent the Krillian Empire, and you're here to discuss our integration into your governmental structure." Ha Young consulted her tablet. "We have counter-proposals that might interest you more than simple conquest." Before Velthara could respond, her communication device crackled to life. The voice of her tactical officer aboard the Dominion's Pride carried a note of urgency that made her blood chill. "Commander, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the colony. These readings, they don't match anything in our databases." Velthara looked around the plaza with new eyes. What she had initially taken for decorative architecture now seemed different. The graceful curves of the buildings, the artistic sculptures, scattered throughout the area, even the benches where humans sat casually eating lunch, all of it suddenly felt wrong. "You might want to look up," Jin Wu said quietly. Above them, the transparent dome that covered the plaza began to shift. What Velthara had assumed was simple weather protection revealed itself as something far more sophisticated. Sections of the dome folded back like flower petals, exposing weapon emplacements that defied every engineering principle she knew. How is that possible? Whispered one of her soldiers. But the dome was just the beginning. Throughout the plaza, and indeed throughout the entire colony visible from their position, buildings began to transform. Elegant residential towers unfolded to reveal missile batteries. Artistic sculptures rotated to expose targeting systems. Even the park benches, she realized with growing horror, contained concealed defensive positions. We call it adaptive architecture, Ha Young explained conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Every structure serves multiple purposes. It's quite efficient. Velthara's communication device crackled again. Commander, the entire colony is armed. Not just military installations. Everything. The shopping centers, the schools, the hospitals. All of them are showing weapons signatures. That's impossible, she said. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't true. Not impossible, Jinwoo corrected gently. Just different from what you're used to. We learned long ago that the line between civilian and military infrastructure is somewhat artificial. Around the plaza, Velthara noticed that the humans who had been casually going about their daily business were still there. But now she saw them differently. Their movements were too coordinated, their positioning too strategic. The elderly man feeding birds near the fountain had perfect sight lines to 3 different access points. The group of teenagers playing some kind of ball game were actually conducting a communications drill. Your entire population, she began, is ready, Ha Young finished. We've been ready since before we left Earth. The question is whether you're ready for what comes next. Are you threatening us? Velthara asked, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Not at all, Jinwoo replied. We're offering you an opportunity to reconsider your approach. You came here expecting conquest, but we're suggesting partnership. Instead, Velthara's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. In 47 previous conquests, the pattern had always been the same. Arrive, demonstrate superior force, accept surrender, establish control. But these humans had turned that pattern inside out. They weren't cowering in fear or preparing desperate last stands. They were sitting at negotiating tables they had apparently set up in advance, discussing proposals, as if they held all the cards. And perhaps, Velthara realized with growing unease, they did. The elevator descended deeper into New Seoul than Velthara had thought possible. What she had assumed was a simple colony built on the surface turned out to extend kilometers underground. Through the transparent walls of the lift, she could see level after level of activity that made her head spin. How deep does this go? She asked Governor Jinwoo, who stood beside her with the same calm expression he had worn since their first meeting. Deep enough, he replied. We learned early that surface appearances can be deceiving. The elevator stopped at what Jinwoo called the coordination level. As the doors opened, Velthara stepped into what could only be described as organized chaos. Hundreds of humans moved with purpose through a space that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon. Massive screens displayed information in languages she didn't recognize, while holographic displays showed 3-dimensional maps of star systems she had never seen. This is impossible, she whispered. Our intelligence said this colony was established only 20 years ago. It was, confirmed Administrator Ha Young, who had joined them for the tour. But we work fast when we need to. A young human male approached them, wearing a uniform that somehow managed to look both military and civilian at the same time. Governor, we have updates from the outer perimeter. Colonel Minho wants to brief you on the defensive grid status. Excellent timing, Jinwoo said. Commander Velthara, I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Tae-min. He coordinates our planetary defense systems. Velthara stared at the human. He looked barely old enough to be considered an adult by Krillian standards, yet he spoke with the confidence of a seasoned military officer. So you're in charge of planetary defense? One of several coordinators, yes, ma'am, Tae-min replied politely. Would you like to see the current status board? Before she could answer, he was already leading them toward a display that made Velthara's breath catch in her throat. The holographic representation showed not just New Seoul but the entire star system, and every single point of light represented some kind of defensive installation. You've militarized your entire solar system, she asked, unable to keep the shock from her voice. We've prepared it, Tae-min corrected. There's a difference. Here, Let me show you the asteroid belt modifications. The display zoomed in on what Velthara had assumed were natural asteroids orbiting the system's outer reaches. As the image sharpened, she saw that each asteroid had been hollowed out and fitted with systems that defied her understanding of physics. "Those are—" she began. "Mobile defense platforms," finished a new voice. Velthara turned to see an elderly human woman approaching, her hair grey but her step firm. "Dr. Yunji, Chief Systems Engineer. We call them our rock gardens." "Rock gardens? A little human humor," Dr. Yunji explained. "Each one can move independently, coordinate with the others, and if necessary, accelerate to significant fractions of light speed. They're quite effective against traditional fleet formations." Velthara's mind reeled. "You're telling me you've turned asteroids into weapons?" "We've turned everything into weapons," Lieutenant Tamin said matter-of-factly. "But also into homes, factories, schools, and art galleries. Dual-purpose construction is very efficient." "Art galleries?" Velthara repeated weakly. "Oh yes, Doctor." Yunji said with genuine enthusiasm. "Asteroid 247C has a wonderful sculpture exhibit. The artists used the zero-gravity environment to create pieces impossible to make on a planet's surface. Of course, it also houses our primary communications array, but that doesn't detract from the artistic value." As they walked deeper into the coordination center, Velthara began to notice details that chilled her. Children, some who couldn't be more than 10 standard years old, sat at control stations managing what appeared to be complex logistical operations. When she pointed this out, Governor Jinwoo nodded approvingly. "Education starts early here," he explained. "Young minds adapt quickly to multitasking. That boy there is tracking supply shipments while practicing orbital mechanics. The girl next to him is coordinating weather control systems while composing music." "Weather control? Climate management," Administrator Ha-Young clarified. "We can't have storms interfering with defensive operations, so we prevent them." A commotion near one of the larger displays caught their attention. A group of humans in their 70s and 80s were engaged in what appeared to be a heated debate with several younger adults. As they approached, Velthara could hear fragments of the conversation. "The third moon approach is too predictable," one elderly human was saying. "Any competent fleet commander would see it coming." "But grandfather," replied a younger human, "the energy requirements for the fourth moon gambit are enormous." "Energy is cheap," the elderly human countered. "Surprise is priceless." "Retirement planning meeting?" Velthara asked, confused. "Strategic Planning Committee," Jinwoo corrected. "Our senior citizens have the most experience with large-scale operations. They're discussing contingency plans for various types of fleet approaches. Your elderly plan military operations?" "Our elderly have lived through military operations," Dr. Yunji said. "Age brings wisdom, and wisdom brings better strategies." As if to prove her point, one of the elderly humans looked up from the debate and called out, "Governor Jinwoo, tell these youngsters that the Procyon Gambit worked perfectly well 40 years ago. Just because they've never seen a proper fleet engagement doesn't mean the classics don't work." "Yes, Director Woojin," Jinwoo replied respectfully. "But perhaps we should consider that our current guests might have studied our historical tactics." Director Woojin looked directly at Velthara, and she felt as if she was being examined by a master strategist. "Ah, our Krillian friend. Tell." "Me, Commander, have your people studied the Battle of Cygnus Prime?" Velthara had never heard of it. "No, I don't believe so." "Pity," Director Woojin said with a slight smile. "It was quite educational. Perhaps you'd like to review the tactical recordings. We keep excellent records of all our engagements." "All your engagements?" Velthara asked. "Oh yes," Lieutenant Tamin said proudly. "We've been documenting military actions for thousands of years. Every battle, every strategy, every innovation, it's all preserved and studied." As the reality of what she was seeing finally sank in, Velthara realized that her 47 previous conquests had prepared her for nothing like this. She wasn't facing a primitive colony defended by scattered civilians. She was standing in the nerve center of a civilization that had turned preparation for war into an art form. And the most terrifying part was that they were treating her visit like a normal Tuesday afternoon. The archives room felt different from the rest of the facility. While the coordination center buzzed with constant activity, this place held an almost sacred silence. Commander Velthara followed Lieutenant Tamin through rows of data storage units that stretched far beyond what her eyes could see. "Everything is here," Tamin explained, his voice naturally dropping to match the room's atmosphere. "Every conflict, every strategy, every lesson learned. We believe that forgetting history means repeating its mistakes." "How much history are we talking about?" Velthara asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. "About 12,000 years of documented warfare," replied a new voice. A middle-aged human woman emerged from between the storage units, carrying what appeared to be an ancient book. "I'm Dr. Young Hee, head archivist. Would you like to see how we organize our military records?" Velthara nodded, though she wasn't sure she really wanted to know. "We start with the earliest conflicts," Dr. Young Hee said, leading them to a section marked with symbols Velthara didn't recognize. Stone Age tribal warfare, Bronze Age city-state conflicts, Iron Age empire building. Humans have been fighting organized battles since before we discovered agriculture. Before agriculture? Velthara's confusion was evident. Most species develop warfare after they establish permanent settlements. "We're not most species," Dr. Young Hee said with what might have been pride. "We figured out how to fight in organized groups while we were still nomads. It gave us certain advantages when we finally did settle down." Lieutenant Tamin activated a holographic display that showed a timeline stretching across the room. "This represents human military development. Each light represents a significant innovation or conflict." The timeline blazed with thousands of points of light, so many that they seemed to form an unbroken chain stretching through the millennia. Velthara stared at it in growing horror. "You never stopped," she whispered. "Not really, no," Dr. Young Hee confirmed. "Even during our most peaceful periods somewhere on Earth, humans were fighting other humans. It kept our skills sharp." "But why?" Velthara asked. "Why fight your own kind so constantly?" "Because we could," Lieutenant Tamin said simply. "Because we disagreed about things. Because we wanted what others had. Because sometimes we just wanted to see who was stronger." Dr. Young Hee pulled up specific records, and images began flowing across the display. Velthara saw humans in primitive armor fighting with metal weapons, then humans in more advanced gear using projectile weapons, then humans in powered suits wielding energy weapons. "This progression took 12,000 years?" she asked. "Oh," next Dr. Young Hee laughed. "The really rapid development happened in just the last few centuries. Want to see something interesting?" The display shifted to show a period marked as the Great Wars. Velthara watched in fascination as human armies numbering in the millions clashed across entire continents. "In this period," Dr. Young Hee explained, "humans developed most of the tactical concepts we still use today. Mass production, combined arms tactics, strategic bombing, electronic warfare, psychological operations." Psychological operations. "Warfare isn't just about destroying the enemy's ability to fight," Lieutenant Tamin explained. "It's about destroying their will to fight. Humans got very good at that." The display showed examples that made Velthara's scales crawl. Humans had developed ways to terrify their enemies without even engaging them directly. They created weapons designed not just to kill, but to demoralize. They studied their opponents' cultures to find psychological weaknesses. "This is," she began, then stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Disturbing," Dr. Young Hee suggested. "Yes, it can be, but it's also effective, and it led to some of our greatest innovations." "Innovations born from war." "Most of our best technology comes from military research," confirmed a new voice. Captain Hyun-soo entered the archives, wearing a uniform that looked both practical and intimidating. Medical advances to treat battlefield injuries, communication systems to coordinate complex operations, transportation technology to move supplies quickly. "Even our space program started as weapons research," Lieutenant Tamin added. "We needed better delivery systems for our most powerful weapons." Velthara felt a chill run through her body. "What kind of weapons?" The three humans exchanged glances. Captain Hyun-soo gestured toward another section of the archives. Perhaps you should see the final war records. They walked to a section marked with warning symbols in multiple languages. Dr. Young-hee's expression became more serious as she accessed the files. Near the end of our planetary period, humans developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in single explosions, she explained. We built enough of them to destroy our entire world several times over. And you used them? Twice, Captain. Hyun-soo said quietly. Then we realized we had created something that could end our species permanently, so we had to learn a new kind of warfare. What kind? The kind where everyone survives, Lieutenant Tae-min replied. We call it deterrence. The idea that being able to destroy everything makes you less likely to destroy anything. The display showed images of human cities that had been reduced to ash and rubble, then rebuilt bigger and better than before. It showed humans who had survived the unthinkable, then used that knowledge to make sure it never happened again. But you kept the weapons, Velthera observed. Of course, Dr. Young-hee said. Forgetting how to build them wouldn't make them disappear. Better to remember how they work so we can defend against them. And improve them, Captain Hyun-soo added matter-of-factly. As they continued through the archives, Velthara began to understand something that chilled her more than the weapons or the tactics. Humans didn't just study war as a necessary evil. They studied it with the same passion other species might reserve for art or philosophy. You enjoy this, she said, and it wasn't a question. Some of us do, Lieutenant Tae-min admitted. There's a certain elegance to a well-executed strategy, beauty in the coordination of complex operations, satisfaction in overcoming impossible odds. We've had 12,000 years to perfect the art of conflict, Dr. Young-hee said. By the time we reached the stars, warfare wasn't just something we did, it was something we were. Standing in that archive room, surrounded by the documented history of human conflict, Velthara finally understood what she was really facing. These weren't primitive colonists who happened to be well-armed. These were the descendants of the most warlike species the galaxy had ever produced, and they had spent millennia perfecting their craft. The most terrifying part wasn't their weapons or their strategies. It was the casual way they discussed the art of destruction, as if they were talking about gardening or cooking. War wasn't what humans did. War was what humans were. The communication chamber aboard the Dominion's Pride felt smaller than usual, as Commander Velthara prepared to deliver what might be the most important report of her career. Her hands trembled slightly as she activated the long-range transmitter that would carry her message across the galaxy to the Krillian High Command. The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Fleet Admiral Zex Thok. His four eyes focused on her with the intensity that had made him legendary throughout the Empire. Behind him, she could see the familiar walls of the Supreme Command Center on Krillus Prime. Velthara. His voice carried the weight of authority across the light years. Your initial report was concerning. The High Council demands a full briefing immediately. Admiral, Velthara began, then paused. How could she possibly explain what she had witnessed? Sir, I recommend we abort this conquest immediately and open diplomatic channels instead. The silence that followed her words seemed to stretch forever. When Zexathok finally spoke, his voice carried dangerous undertones. In 47 successful conquests, you have never made such a recommendation. Explain yourself. These humans are not what our intelligence suggested, she said carefully. They are not a primitive species struggling with basic technology. They are the most militarized civilization I have ever encountered. Militarized how? Our scouts reported minimal defensive capabilities. Before Velthara could answer, another voice interrupted the transmission. Admiral Zexthok, if I may. The camera view expanded to show Director Wu Jin standing beside the communication console. The elderly human had somehow managed to patch into their secured channel without any visible effort. How did you, Zexthok began, access your communication? Network, Director Wu Jin finished pleasantly. We've been monitoring Krillian military frequencies for several months now. Your encryption is quite good, but we've had experience with similar systems. Engineer Young-hee appeared on screen beside the director, carrying a tablet that displayed technical readouts. Actually, Admiral, We've been trying to establish contact with your government for over a year. We sent diplomatic packages to 17 different Krillian worlds, but they seem to have been intercepted by your military sensors. Diplomatic packages? Zexthok's confusion was evident even across the vast distance. Trade agreements, cultural exchange proposals, scientific cooperation treaties, listed communications specialist Daun as she joined the transmission. We prefer to establish relationships through mutual benefit rather than conflict. Admiral So Young stepped into view, her uniform crisp and bearing the insignia of high command. We also included detailed technical specifications for some of our defensive systems, hoping to demonstrate that conquest would be expensive for all parties involved. Velthara watched her superior's expression change as he processed this information. You're saying you attempted peaceful contact first? Of course, Governor Jinwu replied, entering the communication range. War is wasteful. It destroys resources, disrupts trade, and creates unnecessary suffering. We much prefer cooperation. But if cooperation is refused? Zexthok asked, and Velthara could hear the military strategist in him already calculating possibilities. Then we defend ourselves, said General Donghyun, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. And we've become quite good at that over the years. The transmission expanded again, showing the new Seoul Command Center in the background. Zexthok could see the vast arrays of displays, the hundreds of coordinators managing operations, and the casual efficiency with which humans handled what appeared to be a galaxy-spanning military organization. How many worlds do you control? He asked. Control is the wrong word, Administrator Ha-Young corrected, consulting her ever-present tablet. The Terran Alliance currently includes 46 member species across 237 star systems, but they joined voluntarily. Voluntarily. We offered them the same choice we're offering you, Captain Hyun-soo explained. Partnership, protection, and shared prosperity. Most species find it preferable to conquest. Dr. Yoon-ji activated a holographic display that showed the extent of human space. The map revealed a network of interconnected systems that dwarfed the Krillian Empire's territory. But instead of the rigid hierarchy typical of conquered territories, this showed a web of cooperative relationships. Impressive, Zexthok admitted grudgingly. But what if we choose neither partnership nor conquest? What if we simply leave you alone? That would be perfectly acceptable, Governor Jinwu said with genuine warmth. We have no interest in forcing anyone to interact with us. The galaxy is large enough for many different approaches to civilization. However, General Donghyun added quietly, we would ask that you extend the same courtesy to other species. Some of our alliance members were refugees from Krillian conquest attempts. The temperature in the communication chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Velthara realized that this conversation had just shifted from negotiation to something much more serious. Are you threatening the Krillian Empire? Zexthok asked, his voice carrying the deadly calm that preceded military action. Not at all, Director Wu Jin replied. We're offering you information so you can make an informed choice. Knowledge is power, as we humans like to say. Lieutenant Tae-min appeared on screen, carrying what appeared to be a simple data pad. Admiral, we've prepared a comprehensive analysis of Krillian military capabilities, economic systems, and political structures. Would you like us to transmit it to your strategic planning department? You've analyzed our entire empire. Standard procedure, Dr. Young-hee explained. We analyze everyone we encounter. It helps us determine the best approach for establishing relationships. And if your analysis suggests that someone cannot be reasoned with. The humans on screen exchanged glances. When General Dong-hyun spoke, his words carried the weight of 12,000 years of military experience. Then we proceed accordingly. The transmission ended with Admiral Zexthok staring at a blank screen. In the silence that followed, Velthara could hear the soft hum of her ship's engines and the quiet breathing of her bridge crew. Commander, Zexthok's voice finally broke the silence. Return to base immediately. Do not engage the humans under any circumstances. Yes, sir. And Velthara? Sir. Next time we encounter a species that offers us friendship, perhaps we should consider accepting it. As the Dominion's pride turned away from human space, Velthara realized that everything had changed. The age of easy conquest was over. The humans had shown them that there were alternatives to domination, but they had also demonstrated the consequences of rejecting those alternatives. For the first time in her military career, she was grateful to be retreating rather than advancing. Behind them, New Sol continued its daily routine, its citizens going about their business as if nothing significant had happened. And perhaps, Velthara thought, that was the most terrifying thing of all. They had just faced down a galactic empire, and for them it had been just another Tuesday.